Under the silver hush of a prairie night, the land held its breath. The cottonwoods rose like darkened sentinels, their branches whispering in the breeze, their shadows stretched long against the dying glow of a sun already buried beneath the horizon. Beneath one of those trees, a rope swung with terrible rhythm. A woman's body hung there, swaying, her feet bare and bruised, her neck scarred where the cord had cut into her skin. Her name was Elena Rosewood, and though her breaths were shallow, they had not yet left her for good. At her feet, bundled in ragged cloth and nestled in the dust, two newborn girls whimpered as if calling to the earth itself for mercy. Not far away, the man who had strung her there staggered through the brush, his curses heavy with whiskey. Jedediah Boone, 45 years old and twice as bitter, dragged his boots across the dirt like a man trying to bury his own shame in every step. He muttered about bad luck, about curses, about the weight of twin daughters no man should be saddled with. The prairie swallowed him whole, his figure shrinking into the dark until nothing remained but the echo of his slurred rage. The tree still bore its grim witness, the rope creaking as if protesting the cruelty it had been forced to hold. But the plains have ears. Sounds travel far when silence rules the land. Elena's strangled cries and the twins' fragile whimpers carried across the fields, weaving into the wind like threads of sorrow. And it was there, astride a chestnut stallion on his ride back from the trading post, that Colt Remington heard them. He reined in sharply, his hat brim low, his gaze narrowing toward the sound. Colt was a man of 29 years, his reputation one of wealth and quiet command. His ranch stretched further than the eye could see, cattle dotting the horizon like moving shadows, his barns sturdy and painted clean. Yet for all his possessions, his home echoed with silence. He had no wife, no children, no voice calling his name when he returned from the saddle. Loneliness clung to him like dust. The cries reached him again, thin, uncertain, yet undeniable. He leaned forward in the saddle, every muscle tense with that strange pull of instinct, of dread, of something that felt like fate. His stallion shifted uneasily, ears pricked toward the sound. For a moment, Colt questioned himself. Perhaps it was an animal, a trick of wind? But something in the sound refused to release him. He nudged the horse forward, his lantern swinging from the saddle horn, the glow carving trembling shapes against the land. Each step drew him closer, the cries sharpening until he knew without doubt, they belonged to the living. When the tree appeared in his lantern's halo, Colt's breath stilled. At first all he saw was the rope, its burden swaying. Then the fragile shape beneath it, two tiny bundles moving faintly at the roots. He leapt from his horse before the reins had fully stilled, his boots hitting the dirt in a spray. The lantern's light climbed up the rope, revealing her face, pale, bruised but still warm with the faintest flush of life. He cursed under his breath, fumbling with his knife. The rope was coarse and dug deep, but his blade made quick work and her body slumped into his arms. He laid her gently against the roots, every movement deliberate, reverent, as though the prairie itself had appointed him her caretaker. Her chest rose shallowly. Her pulse was weak but present. Relief cut through him, raw and immediate. Then came the wail of one twin, sharp and piercing, while the other's was weaker, almost fading. He knelt, his hands shaking as he lifted each child. Tiny, fragile things, their skin flushed red against the pale moonlight. One girl clutched his finger with a surprising strength, while the other seemed too tired to cry. Colt's throat tightened. A memory struck him unbidden. His younger sister, Clara, frail and starving in a winter long gone, her hand limp in his as she slipped away before help could come. He had been just a boy, helpless then, and that helplessness had carved something jagged into him that never left. Not again. Never again. The vow formed silently in his chest, heavy and certain. He gathered the twins, then Elena, balancing the weight with care as he brought them to his horse. It took patience and quiet strength, but he managed, positioning them so no jolt of the ride would undo the fragile thread still holding them to life. Then, without another glance at the rope that still swung accusingly in the breeze, he spurred his horse toward his ranch. The night was endless, the ride long, but Colt rode steady, his jaw set. Behind him, the cottonwood stood alone, its branches sighing as though relieved of their burden. Ahead, the lights of his homestead flickered faintly, promising shelter. By the time he carried Elena inside, sweat ran down his back, but his hands were steady. He laid her on his own bed, the finest linens he owned, then turned to the twins. He found cloth, warmed milk, anything that might coax strength back into their tiny bodies. Hours stretched into dawn, every minute spent between tending the children and pressing water to Elena's lips. When her eyes fluttered open at last, catching the pale light of morning, Colt felt something shift within him. She blinked slowly, disoriented, her throat raw. Her gaze darted, then settled on the twins nestled near the fire. Relief flooded her expression, followed quickly by shame. Her hand moved instinctively to her neck, touching the mark that told her what had been done. She struggled to sit, but Colt gently pressed her back with a hand, firm but not demanding. She looked at him then, truly looked, her dark eyes filled with questions too heavy to form. He said nothing. Words were fragile things and he feared they might shatter the moment. Instead, he moved with quiet purpose, stoking the fire, checking the twins, setting broth to simmer. Every gesture told her what words could not. She was safe at least for now. Yet she felt the weight of unworthiness press harder. She had been cast aside, branded a burden, abandoned by the man who should have protected her. Now another man, stranger and richer, offered care she did not believe she deserved. In the days that followed, Elena spoke little. She nursed her daughters, tended them as best she could, yet avoided Colt's eyes whenever he entered the room. He gave her space, but his presence filled every corner, always near enough to steady, never close enough to press. He mended a cradle with his own hands, carved from oak, and left it quietly by the fire. He boiled water, brewed tea, left fresh bread where she might find it. These were not grand gestures, not declarations, but steady acts that built a foundation without asking for anything in return. But the world beyond the ranch was not blind. The town whispered. The rancher, it was said, had taken in a hanged woman and her cursed twins. Folks at the saloon laughed low, calling her a stain on his good name, a foolish charity that would sour his fortune. Elena heard it through hushed tones at the trading post, through sidelong glances as she passed. Each whisper pressed deeper into her skin, a reminder of her place in their eyes, less than unwanted, unworthy. She carried their judgment home with her, heavier than the scar around her neck. Yet when Colt returned each evening, dust on his hat and exhaustion in his shoulders, he would pause before entering his home. He would look toward the window where the fire glowed, where the shadows of Elena and her daughters flickered, and something in his posture softened. He bore the weight of the town's scorn without flinching. His silence became his rebellion, his quiet care a declaration louder than words. Elena felt it each time he set down his gloves, each time he fixed something broken, each time he gave space without abandonment. And still she avoided his gaze. For to meet it meant believing she might still belong to the living. She feared what would follow if she allowed herself that belief. She feared hope most of all. But nights are long on the prairie, and silence cannot hold forever. One evening when the twins slept soundly, Elena's voice broke the stillness. Rough from disuse, yet trembling with quiet strength, she asked him why. Why had he stopped? Why had he chosen to save her, a woman already discarded by her husband and the town alike? Colt paused, the firelight catching the lines of his face, shadows playing across his steady gaze. He did not answer with words at first. He moved to the cradle, gently brushing a strand of dark hair from one twin's brow. His hand lingered there, not out of possession but of recognition. Then he spoke, voice low, almost hesitant. Because once someone I loved needed saving and I couldn't. I won't let that happen again. The words hung between them, heavy and unpolished, yet truer than any vow. Elena's chest tightened. She studied him in the flickering light, the quiet steadiness that seemed carved into his very being. And for the first time since the rope had been cut from her neck, she felt something stir that was not shame, not fear, but a fragile seed of belonging. Outside, the prairie wind pressed against the walls, whispering of storms yet to come. Inside, the silence was no longer empty but waiting, filled with questions neither dared to speak, filled with the fragile threat of something just beginning. And though neither of them would name it, not yet, the night itself seemed to lean closer, listening, knowing. For the story of the woman who had been hanged and the man who heard her cries was only just unfolding, and the plains, as always, carried their voices farther than either could see.